Okay, this is Fort Sumter. A lot of people know that Fort Sumter is the first battle of the Civil War, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper. To do so, we're going to backtrack to March of 1861 during Lincoln's first inaugural address. Lincoln actually has a lot of help on this by Secretary of State William Seward, who tells Lincoln, don't be too aggressive toward the South, be lenient, and mentions stuff like, we're just going to hold on to all of the forts and U.S. property. The South has already had a number of states secede at this point, one of them being South Carolina. Fort Sumter is located in Charleston, South Carolina. They believed the fort should be theirs. Lincoln says, no, if anything's going to start, you will be the aggressors on this one. I'm going to hold the fort. Okay, let's fast forward to April of 1861. Major Robert Anderson is the officer in charge at Fort Sumter. In fact, he had just recently moved his troops from Fort Moultrie to Fort Sumter because it was better positioned to do so. He actually kind of sneakily does that and is a pseudo-hero in the North for a while, and then even more so after Fort Sumter. But he tells Lincoln's administration that he needs to be resupplied. Now, Lincoln and his cabinet have real split decisions on what to do with Sumter. They don't want to just let it go and relinquish it to the South because that'll make them look bad, but they don't want to be the aggressors. It kind of puts Lincoln in the blender of what to do. William Seward, by the way, will get Lincoln into some trouble. He's going to send the U.S. Powhatans down to Pensacola, Florida to resupply Fort Pickens. The Secretary of State, Gideon Welles, Lincoln, and William Seward are all kind of on different pages. The Powhatan should have been here. Nonetheless, it's at Fort Pickens. Fort Pickens, by the way, is named after a Revolutionary War hero. That person's grandfather is Pickens, the governor of South Carolina at the time of the Fort Sumter debacle here. If we go back to April 12th of 1861, Lincoln has advice from a general in the Navy. His last name's Fox. I believe it's Gustavus. I don't actually know how you say his first name, so I'm sorry about that. Anyways, he says we're just going to resupply the fort. He gives this whole idea to Lincoln. That's what Lincoln's going to go with. So on April 12th of 1861, Lincoln lets Pickens, the governor of South Carolina, know that he's just coming with just supplies to resupply Fort Sumter because Robert Anderson says they need more supplies. Well, P.J.T. Beauregard, who is the Confederate general in South Carolina, was given word by Jefferson Davis to fire upon the fort. The South is actually going to fire on the Star of the West. That's the ship coming in with just the supplies, meaning it's going to have to backtrack. Pickens, Beauregard are there to fire the first shots at Fort Sumter. They announced that they're going to fire in like an hour or so. Bombardment takes place over a couple days and the fort gets absolutely shelled. Interestingly enough, nobody is actually killed at Fort Sumter. The only death occurs after the fact when the flag is ceremoniously lowered. Beauregard and Robert Anderson went to West Point together, so Beauregard wanted Anderson to honorably surrender the fort, which he does. Nonetheless, Lincoln can say that the South is the aggressor to the Civil War. The southern states will then secede, including like Virginia and a handful of others after the fact. But look into the story of Fort Sumter. It's a lot more than just the first battle of the Civil War. But I'm running out of time. Per always, hopefully you learned something. Love you all.